Welcome, everyone, to another edition of G-Rated. I'm your host, Gerald Bourget, where we talk about the latest movies and TV shows. Today, I'm joined by my co-host on The Sun Show, Lindsey Smith, and Johnny, my fellow Star Wars aficionado. But today, we are diving into another movie franchise. We are doing Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, which just came out a couple weeks ago. And I was really excited for this one because this is one of my favorite projects that the MCU has. Lindsey, we'll start with you because you are not an MCU diehard like Johnny and I. What were your initial thoughts on the movie?
I loved it. Honestly, I feel like if there was one, I don't know what they're called, but I'm going to call it a series within that Marvel space that I think is the easiest to get into and most easily digestible, it's Guardians of the Galaxy because there's a lot of humor behind it. It's not like as superhero-y, if you will. And a lot of the characters are kind of like misfits, which I appreciate. Yeah,
it's more like a ragtag bunch that I don't know. Do any of them really have like technically superpowers? I'm trying to.
I
guess Gamora kind of. Yeah, they have
I don't
powers.
know if they would be like a superhero or something like that.
Yeah,
but I relate to that a lot more. I like that.
Yeah, they're the ragtag offshoot bunch, and I think that's what makes them easy to access, whether you are an MCU fan or not. Johnny, obviously, you are. What were your thoughts on the movie and this long-awaited third movie to the trilogy?
Yeah, it's bittersweet because first of all, I love the film, Gerald, you know that, but you think about like, is this kind of the last A tier in the MCU that we're going to get at least for a hot minute, right? So we're talking off air about like Avengers, Infinity War, and Endgame, and this is, in my opinion, like the same tier, and we haven't gotten too much of that since those films. We've had a lot of filler. I haven't been infatuated with the other movies, the TV shows. So this was bittersweet, especially. I mean, I don't know how we talk about this and not talk about like James Gunn leaving you to go run DC, which I'm fired up about. But it's just like, if you're Marvel, it's like, heck yeah, we got maybe another $1 billion movie. But on the same court, it's like, is this kind of the last of it? Because you look at a lot of these characters have been adamant they're not going to return. But in terms of this film, I try to look at this film like as a singular entity within this trilogy. And if that's the case, it's, they hit the ball out of the park. I don't know if it's my favorite. Each one kind of holds a special place, especially in like the MCU hierarchy. I love Yondu as a character, but in terms of like putting a bow on it, at the end of this trilogy, I think they basically landed the plane.
Yeah, I think so too. And I think you brought up a good point about it might not be my favorite of the trilogy, but those other two are really high bars to live up to.
Yeah.
And it is going to be interesting because, like you alluded to, Zoe Saldana has said she's probably done being Gamora. Dave Bautista probably done being Drax. It did say at the end that Star-Lord will return in the future, so we know Chris Pratt is probably going to be back in some form. And we saw at the end, in the end credits, there is a different iteration of the Guardians of the Galaxy that's existing, but it's not going to be the same moving forward. Obviously, a lot of them going their separate ways and whatnot. Was this I know this is maybe a difficult question for you, but was this your favorite post-Infinity War project? Because for me, it's up there with Wakanda Forever as probably the best thing that they've done after the whole Thanos stuff.
Yeah, that's a hard question to answer because I haven't seen Endgame. Is Endgame? Is that what it's called?
Okay, yes.
Yeah, I haven't seen that. And I don't think I've seen the newest Wakanda either.
Okay.
So
Johnny? Wrong crew.
It's probably second for me behind like Spider-Man No Way Home, but like I'm full like that movie is awesome. It's like gimmicky though because you can bring every villain and every former Spider-Man. Like this is a better movie than that. I enjoyed Spider-Man No Way Home just a tick more, and then I'm with you, Jared. I'd probably put Wakanda Forever third. But this movie's right there. I mean, it probably had the best. It definitely had the best like overarching story. Spider-Man No Way Home, though, I mean, to bring back Willem Dafoe and Green Goblin and Doc Ock and everything, that's tough to beat for me. And I think that movie like almost made $2 billion. So I don't think this one is going to be as financially successful as that. But I do think like if I saw it on a given day, it might be my favorite.
Yeah, I totally forgot about No Way Home, that was post Infinity War. That's a good call.
I know it doesn't even feel like it is because it's a Sony movie.
Right.
And that's all these caveats for Marvel. It's like, yeah, No Way Home was great, but it's a Sony film, and Guardians was great, but it was James Gunn and he's leaving. I'm like, where are your 3 and 4 hitters now, Marvel. It's going to be tough for them.
Right.
And I know we'll probably get into that, but it does feel like a passing of the baton a little bit. These trilogies are ending now. It's like, what do we do?
Yeah, because they've got a new Captain America, they've got, you know, a new Black Panther, and Spider-Man will apparently go on, but like the heavy hitters are not there anymore, especially with, you know, Iron Man gone, Captain America gone, whatever. But let's get into the movie a little bit, because I felt like in a lot of ways it ratcheted up both the wacky humor from this trilogy and also like legitimately traumatic
Oh my
things.
God. Did you guys cry? Honestly, did you cry?
I teared up. My fiance also teared up. Didn't cry, but got very close.
Bro, I had like a full-on teardrop run down my cheek like 3 times. I was like, what is happening right now?
Yeah.
I came here to laugh. But it was so...
The animal stuff was heavy.
Yeah.
It was. Did it go a little too far in anyone's opinion, or did we feel like it was poignant and
I think
well
from
done?
an adult perspective, no. Maybe from a kid's perspective,
Okay.
you could say yes.
And I took my 8-year-old, and he was pretty terrified during the film at parts, and then after the movie, woke up in the middle of the night that night. And he didn't say it was because of this film, but it likely. I mean, the villain was one of the best. It's probably the best in the trilogy easily. And then, yeah, all the extra stuff with the animal dysmorphia or whatever you want to call it, like that was pretty messed up.
Yeah, it definitely hit hard. That's for sure. I took my 7-year-old niece with me. She didn't seem like scared or anything of that sort, but I will say the total runtime of the movie got a little tough for her. About an hour and 45 minutes in, she's like, how much longer is this? Not that she wasn't entertained. It was just,
right.
You know, kids have a short attention span.
Yeah, for sure. And that's one of my main complaints or concerns about the movie, but we'll get to that. The animal rights stuff, it did seem poignant. I was glad that they were able to save all the animals at the very end, because it was bordering on very dark territory, and fully crossing into it. Who knew that a CGI baby rocket would be so affecting? Yeah, I thought that was really good, but it also had a nice blend of, like I was saying, like that wacky humor, like that whole trip that they took to that living organism planet or whatever it was with Nathan Fillion and whatnot. Like,
he's funny. That
was just hilarious, and it was just off the wall like comedy that this trilogy has become known for.
Yeah. I will say I did really like, not to get ahead of you here, Gerald, but I like that you got a little bit more depth from each character within this movie, right? Like you saw that Drax wanted, like they said, his whole thing was he needed to be a dad.
Yeah.
And then what's Gamora's sister's name?
Nebula.
You saw a little bit of the softer side of her, which you rarely ever see. So I like that you got a little bit more of that from majority of the characters here. Groot even is starting to talk now.
Right.
What?
Yeah, I mean they did. I think they did a good job giving each one a character arc and picking up on things that had been in there in the past, like the whole Drax thing, losing his family to Thanos, and then comes full circle. He's taking care of these orphans on this planet. Nebula becoming a leader of a healthy community. Gamora the Gamora thing was an interesting one for me, because I feel like a lot of people were expecting it to be the neat little bow where she initially hates Star-Lord and then she comes to fall in love with him all over again. And instead it was like,
low-hanging fruit, though.
Yeah, instead it was like, no, we're going to do something more complex, where she like comes to an understanding with him that I am different and I'm going to go off and do my own thing. And I thought that was handled pretty well. Johnny,
and I also found my family.
Yeah, exactly. Johnny, what did you think of the different character arcs?
Yeah, well, and that you hit the nail on the head. That was going to be part of my point, is Gamora, like that's real life. And if they would have just played the cliche, that would have been easy and disappointing. And we've seen other films do that. But I think they handled that about as well as they could. And you go back and you think about, like, did James Gunn intend to have her die in Infinity War? Was that his call or not? Like, so to kind of maybe having to clean up that a little bit, you can't really get a real answer from him whether or not this was always intended. But I mean, he wrote it as if it was. And I think the way they played it out, ingratiated and got her into the film while she had a purpose to stick around. It never felt like she was just sticking around to hang out. She always had a purpose, and every character had a purpose. And that was great to see. I know a lot of people, like on Twitter and the internet, are a little bit disappointed because they spend so much time talking about Rocket. But the first 2 movies are basically fleshed out for Peter Quill. And it's like, okay, well, we know what's going on with him. We never really got insight into Rocket's backstory, which I think was great. I thought they handled that really well. Again, I thought I can't remember his name, not the Overlord, but the high authority or whatever, evolutionary, that he's probably easily a top 10 Marvel MCU villain, but the best in this trilogy, I think, did a great job just being just a hated villain. He didn't have any other purpose outside of for you to dislike him. And I like that while this movie had like big spectacles, it felt very grounded. It's like, I'm not trying to take over the universe, and they kind of played off of that. And so I like the best portions of the MCU, like No Way Home and like Wakanda Forever. It's just like, these are stories that they're not grounded, but they are, right? And they can be watched individually without connecting them to the other movies. And that to me was the best part of the MCU, like early on. And now the interconnectivity and world dominance or universe dominance, I think gets things a little bit too muddled. And so this movie, it's very much, they're all trying to accomplish the same thing. It's like Rocket gets hurt within the first 10 minutes. Let's help him. And that's really what the movie was about from then on there. And I thought it worked really well.
Yeah, I think to your point, what I liked about this movie is it's a good example of Marvel when they're able to tell a self-contained story, but that story actually be good. Because one of the complaints about the post-Infinity War projects is that they're all like interconnected to a degree, but a lot of them don't really build to anything like a Thanos level type threat. Like it's not as interesting. Like they're interweaving, but they're not building to something like really big or tangible yet. And obviously the whole Kang thing, they're working on that part of it. But this was a good example of like, okay, we can do something that you don't have to watch all of these other movies to get and appreciate, like you were saying, Lindsay. But
it's great for us casuals.
Yeah, exactly. It's great for the casuals. It's just a good standalone movie. And Marvel hasn't had a ton of those wins recently. But you mentioned Rocket. I wanted to ask, he's got to be the MVP of this movie, right?
Johnny, you go first.
Yeah, I think if he wasn't, then the movie wouldn't work, right? And I loved the stuff at the end with him discovering that raccoons were actually called raccoons. Because I don't think I had ever put 2 and 2 together that he hated to be called a raccoon, but he honestly didn't know he was a raccoon. And to pay that off at the end was fantastic. So he was. And it's like, how much was Bradley Cooper even in the movie? Because he was a baby at some times, and they had to like alter his voice, and he wasn't really Rocket in the movie until maybe like the last third of the film. So regardless, yeah, he's easily the MVP. I would say if I had to pick just like a silver medal, I thought Nebula was great. I think they fleshed out her character really well since the first film. She's way more likable. I think Karen Gillan plays her, just a fantastic actress, and everything she does in terms of like, there's a purpose and you understand why she's there, and the narrative that she never had a family growing up. She resented Gamora, and now it's come full circle. And she was trying to, like, Gamora tried to court her in the second film. It was like a reversal in this movie. And I thought that was really well done.
Yeah.
Okay. So I think you could say that Rocket was the MVP, but what's the girl with the antennas?
Mantis.
Mantis is my personal MVP because I feel like Mantis was the glue or the core that pushed everybody to figure out who they were.
She's the heart of the group.
Yes, thank you. That's exactly the best way to describe it. She's like, no, I know more about who you are. Like, I know that there's something deeper inside of you. Let's pull that out. Let's explore that a little bit. And I appreciate her, because if it wasn't, plus with the whole like big old worm looking dude thingies at the end, she was the hero of that.
She was.
Because she could see there was more to them than just a big scary monster.
No,
she's my second MVP.
I'm glad you brought Mantis up, because I feel like Rocket was my MVP, but in terms of dynamics, like possibly my favorite of this movie and maybe the trilogy as a whole is the comedic chemistry between Dave Bautista as Drax and Pom Klementieff as Mantis. It's so funny the way that like he says the meanest things to her and she just takes it because she's like happy-go-lucky or whatever.
She's like, I know you're a big softy deep down.
Yeah, but then she'll dish it right back. I feel like it hit its peak in this movie. And also, I don't know if you saw the Christmas special, Johnny. I'm sure you did, but it was great in that as well. But those two were my favorite. And I like that, you know, we talked about Drax kind of having a complete character arc. So did Mantis in terms of realizing like I've just kind of been subservient to everyone around me. I've been a caregiver. Now I'm going to go out and do my own thing. And I liked that. Any complaints or concerns with the movie as a whole?
I would just say it was a little long.
Yeah.
It was still good all the way through. It wasn't one of those movies where you get an hour and 45 minutes in and you're like, all right, I'm ready for this to be over.
Right.
Necessarily, because the story wasn't interesting anymore. The story was interesting throughout the entire thing, but it still was a little long.
Yeah.
I think the only thing that kind of not ruined it for me at the end, but like, you know, because we follow this, Gerald, like we had heard like Dave Bautista's like, I'm done when this movie's over. A bunch of the cast said that. So you kind of had a preconceived notion, like going into the last half of the movie. It's like, are people going to die? Are they going to get killed off? And it's like, it's not like I would rather people get killed off, but I am a little cynical to like, so like Drax isn't going to be in anything moving forward. He's alive. He's just kind of hanging out there. Same with Rocket, you know, same with Nebula, same with Gamora. And I think that I'm sure that creates a little bit of a loophole down the line, but I think I probably would have preferred a character or two to go to have it feel more weighted, because they teased that, right? James Gunn came out and said this is going to be an emotional film. I was very surprised everybody made it through the film alive.
Right. I was low-key counting on Rocket and maybe one other character dying.
I thought Drax for sure would be dead, because Dave has been adamant, I'm done playing this character. And you could have had a cool moment where he sacrificed himself. But yeah, it's interesting. I don't dislike it for that reason. It just kind of caught me off guard.
Right. But wouldn't that have been that's too much sadness for one movie when you add in all the other sadness? Like, come on.
It is.
It's too much.
It is, but at the same time, I get Johnny's point, because it is going to feel weird when other cosmic shit is going down and they're like, you know, who could help Gamora, but she's off just, you know, doing whatever with the Ravagers.
You worry about yourself, I'll worry about mine.
With space.
You handle your business. I'm retired.
She's just hanging out with Space Sylvester Stallone or like whatever. But
I mean, like we talked about, like No Way Home, Aunt May dies, Wakanda Forever, a bunch of people die, Endgame, Infinity War. I think that Marvel uses, I'm not a fan of the multiverse, because I think it's a crutch for weak storytelling, because you can just bring people back. And I think that they can take a coup from like, it's okay to let characters be gone. Like if you're trusting of like your staffing department and your writers, like find new characters, but especially when your characters are adamant, like we're not going to be a part of this anymore. But it's James Gunn's vision. If he wanted them to die, I'm sure they would have died.
Yeah, and which totally fair. I do think there's something to the effect of leaving the door open for the future, even if Dave Bautista and Zoe Saldana are trying to slam that bit shut. Like that'll be something to keep an eye on for sure. My other complaints were kind of minor. The Adam Warlock character was the gold guy.
I kind of liked him.
I liked him. I think if you're a comic book fan, you were probably disappointed with how he was handled, because he was supposed to, in the original story, have a much more significant role in the Infinity War stuff. And at that stage of the MCU, they were like, this is too much to throw into the story. It's going to take too much time to explain who he is. And like Infinity War is already long enough. So they just kind of like shoehorned him in here. And I thought he was funny. I thought he was a nice addition, but I do wonder if the character's full potential was really explored, because he was just kind of like a beautiful dummy with powers, like which is totally fine. Like there's a role for that, but I know some people were disappointed about that.
Well, I think a lot of people thought he was going to be the main villain of the movie when it was announced, and they had teased him in the post-credit scene of Volume 2. I don't know anything about him in the comic books outside of like reading up before this movie, but I'm with you, and that's a pretty common complaint, is the diehards are saying, well, you could have done more with him. I mean, the movie was really long. I don't know what more, if you're going to push this to 3 hours. And I do think, outside of everybody else we've talked about, like I think there's a really good possibility like he appears down the line. I think they probably locked him in because he's a new character. He was well received. He just, like, I'm okay with them not taking a ton of time to flesh him out when you've got the OG Guardians that need the attention.
I will say, if he does continue down any sort of storyline, that little animal, the little fluff ball, that was so freaking cute, needs to be his sidekick forever. I'm going to be really upset if they bring him back and they don't bring back the sidekick.
I'm sure it's a package deal. They've got
needs to be.
Like he lost his mom. He's got to have some sort of comfort.
I want one of those things so bad.
Yeah.
My other last complaint, to your point about the villain, I felt like he was a very good villain, but I wish there would have been more rationalization for kind of what he was doing and why he was doing it.
Yeah, like why did he all of a sudden decide he needed to create this perfect universe?
Right. Like he had that one line about like God doesn't exist, that's why I'm doing what I'm doing, or something along those lines. But it never really gave him enough purpose or rationality behind why he was doing what he was doing, because I thought he was a fascinating villain, and I love that Marvel had, like we were talking about, a standalone story with a villain that doesn't, you know, require world domination to tie into the storyline. Like it was something smaller, very big. He formed his own world, obviously, but like it wasn't to that cosmic universal degree. But I felt like I wanted to know more about why he was doing what he was doing.
But maybe to Johnny's point originally when he brought him up, he was just a dislikable character, and that was it. And maybe they didn't want to give him any backstory, so there isn't the whole were they right, were they wrong kind of a thing. Like, can we find some empathy for this person and the reasoning behind why? We just wanted him to be a dislikable character. So maybe there's a reasoning there.
That is true, because it is a slippery slope if you give a villain whose whole thing is abusing animals like any sort of point to latch onto and identify with. So I guess that's a valid point.
I also really like, and I'm going to knock on Quantumania because it was the one I saw right before this. There were so many, if you've seen Quantumania, there were so many plot holes at the end with how strong is Kang? Can he do this? Can he do that? And it was just, it didn't make any sense. A lot of that movie didn't make any sense. Whereas this, it's like, yeah, if the Guardians team up on this guy, like 7-on-1, they're going to kick his ass in like 30 seconds. And I thought that was great. I didn't need a big, gross CGI battle with him becoming oversized and overpowered. It was like, no, they're going to help their friend. And it took 30 seconds. And I thought that was really well done. I don't think there's enough. It's weird to say like these movies need to be more grounded, but like we've had Thanos, and even him at the end of Infinity War could have been overtaken. Obviously, at the end of Endgame, like not everybody needs to be Thanos. People can outsmart you with their intellect, and you can have rationale. And I really I'm like, I don't need to see a 25-minute with he versus Rocket. Like if the Guardians team up on him, he would be dead instantly, and that's what happened.
Right. No, I totally agree with that. To your point about team ups, the one shot in the hallway was really freaking cool. I feel like we can't finish this review without the one camera shot where they're all fighting in the hallway and it's just showing.
Right. Yeah.
That was very cool. That was well done.
Here's what I will add real quick though. I did think, and I have the other two on vinyl. I thought this was the weakest soundtrack of the three. That's my critique. I liked the music in 1 and 2 way more, and I like Florence and the Machine. I thought that was a great track at the end, but the rest of the music was pretty standard MCU music, and I had high expectations because of the two soundtracks that preceded this film.
It was bookended by two really great ones: Creep, Radiohead, to kind of introduce Rocket and what he's going through, and then the Florence and the Machine one. I liked the use of the Beastie Boys, but I felt like it was maybe a little too on the nose.
Was that just in the Mario movie, Gerald? I feel like that was just in a movie I saw within the last 4 to 6 weeks. And James Gunn can't help that, but his shtick was like picking these gems from the 60s, 70s, 80s that you wouldn't initially think. And this one was it just didn't hit for me.
No, the first two were a lot better in that regard. But final scores out of 10. Lindsay, we'll start with you.
I mean, I'll give it an 8. Okay. I liked it.
There we go.
If it came on TV and I was at home, I would watch it again.
Okay. Wow. That's about the highest praise we can get out of Lindsay. All right. Johnny, how about you?
I'll back Lindsay because my wife has abandoned Marvel movies. She says we watch them too much. This is the only one she's like, I would go see that, but she stayed home with our daughter. So she will watch it when it comes on Disney Plus. So it has a universal appeal. I think they're all 9s out of 10s consistently across the board, 1, 2, and 3 for different reasons. So I would say not a 10 out of 10, but in that upper tier, so 9 out of 10 for me.
Yeah.
Guardians is by far the best. I said at the beginning of this review, it's just so easy to get on board with it because it's not huge commitment, but also the characters are way more, in my opinion, fun.
Yes. Their dynamic, their communication, their dialogues together are
Yeah, I don't want to watch you talking about saving the world. I want to see you guys poking fun at each other.
right. Like the whole
Like
bit
that feels like more like a real group of friends to me, you know?
Yeah, the whole bit with the microphones and the colors when when
that was hilarious.
trying to communicate with Gamora and they were all listening, that was fantastic. For me, it's a 9 out of 10 as well. I feel like I said, this is up there with Wakanda Forever and No Way Home as my favorite post-Infinity War projects, which those have not been as strong recently. But I thought it was a fitting way to cap off one of Marvel's most unique projects. So I really enjoyed it. But that's going to do it for us here at G Rated. You can follow Lindsey at Lindsey Smith AZ. You can follow Johnny at Johnny Venerable, and you can follow me at Gerald Bourget. Until next time, keep it G Rated.